Shinji and Warhammer40k. Chapter 41. The Coming Storm. Part 3.
Masato Katsuragi considered herself as a very unsuitable person. Why not as a mother? The reasons were obvious. As a lover, she had trouble with the idea of love in itself, though not acting out its expressions. As a soldier, she was very driven, but her role was now that of a general. She still felt guilt and disgust that only children could fight the war. She was one of those people who sought freedoms, then was terrified by the vast expanse of potentiality when they actually reach it. She sought order, and was paradoxically happier chafing under it. "Is this really necessary?" Fuyutsuki asked, wincing as Misato pulled tight on the knot. "I'm not going to run away, you know."
"We can't spare any guards to watch you right now, so sit back and get a box seat in case we all die horrible screaming deaths."
She put her hand on her hips, sirens and explosions in the background, inspecting her handiwork. Inconveniencing others, now that was something she could do quite well. NERV, despite being a paramilitary organisation, was very light in terms of personal security, for certain reasons now only becoming obvious. "Right, rope, couldn't you just handcuff me to this chair?" he continued. "Why do you even have rope here in the command centre?" She shrugged.
"I've learned to always be prepared these days. I don't know if I would ever get any use out of it, but hey, look!"
"You know, I could be enjoying this sort of thing," Fuyutsuki muttered. Misato frapped him on the back of his head. "Stay!" she pointed, walking backwards and into the elevator down the command tower. It was the least she could do to soothe her feelings of betrayal. It was a massive revelation. She'd be extremely lucky if NERV even still existed should they win this battle. She walked over to the tactical stations and looked up at the screen. Misato patted the headrests of Makoto's chair.
"They're doing well."
"Hi, Colonel," he answered. 6 kilometers is extremely cramped for Evangelion, and now that thing, but somehow they're managing to keep it distracted from attacking us here." On the screen, the two giant war machines fought while their pilots traded insults. The Black Warborn dove and dodged, all the while countering whatever condemnation it was Shinji directed its way.
"Oh, he's good,"
thought Misato. The briefing on Nagisa was very, very bare, though it was admitted he was supposed to be NERV's 4th child. Asuka knew him. Hell, was a pen pal for months, and no one managed to put 2 and 2 together? Who could keep that sort of thing? Gendo. He must have redirected Section 2. Why? Regardless, the two boys had, despite vows to murder each other, an uncommon rapport. Like rivals. Like Lupin and Zenigata or something.
"Oh, come on! These two flirt fight more than Asuka ever did!"
"I am not tsundere for this fool!" Kaworu shouted, proving the comlink was still active.
"That was oddly specific."
"Oh, I will burn all of you. Seriously, I'm not kidding. I'm going to do it." Shinji stabbed him in the face. Again, then used the Warborn's neck as a springboard to get at the much larger Ava beast's soft underbelly. Trident's Dominatus regenerated the damage in less than a second, and, annoyed, flew up to attack from a different angle. Misato turned towards Shigeru.
"Anything on Gendo?"
"Sorry, Katsuragi-san. The outer corridors are already filled with Bakelite, and all the secondary armor plating's locked in. We can't search effectively right now."
She then turned to Satsuki, who eeped at the glance. The second shift had never experienced this sort of intensity out of the command crew. Even Shigeru Alba, long-haired and lackadaisical, had a steely demeanour.
"Hey, are you listening to me?"
"Yes, ma'am, I mean...
Crap.
Very sorry, but please repeat your orders, ma'am."
Briefly, Misato glanced back to Ritsuko's empty chair.
"How's the Mashi? What's the status on Unit 1's power reserves?"
"Online, but at minimal operational authority, ma'am. As for the Ava, it has 12 minutes of power left." Misato bit her lip. As long as the Ava was out there, she couldn't engage NERV's own defensive measures. At the same time, there was no way of knowing if pulling back wouldn't just leave both Nagisa and that beast racing to attack the NERV's pyramid. Its armour wasn't as thick as it looked. She began drumming on Makoto's headrest. Shinji had the ability to pull through when all things seemed lost, but that was no guarantee either. It was something only she could decide. Even if she had a link to Cerberus base, as NERV's operations chief, her authority far exceeded even that of the great strategist. She looked left.
"Unit 0 and Magnos Tancred?"
"They're still at the main gate," Shigeru answered. "The elevators are offline. We've got people climbing up the maintenance tubes to manually start them."
Masato nodded. Magi was maintaining total lockdown. It was just unlucky that it meant the enemy was trapped alongside them. That plan wasn't exactly a mistake, since it did remove the enemy's assault coming from the moon, but now they were stuck. Again. She needed Ritsuko. Even Maya would be good. Gendo would do, if just as a punching bag to relieve her frustration. She looked around. Everybody inside the command center looked to her for assurance. Should she break, so would they. Shit! She summed up the situation. Fighting for his life, Shinji Kari had no attention to spare for any tactical decisions past the next 30 seconds. Nagisa, what have you got? Excuse me? Unlike Ayanami, you've been using your AT field for much longer and more often. You must have something we can use. Angels, or at least Adam-derived life forms, come in many different forms, shapes and sizes. But what's common about them all is that they use the AT field. Kaworu managed to groan out, roll half inside a hill. He dug himself out and pointed with an accusing finger. I object to your impression of it as some multi-purpose tool. True enough it is, but what it's used for is for them to communicate. Humans communicate by the crude method of forcing air molecules to vibrate. The angel's sense of self is altered as they move about, and resonance between fields change every angel as they meet. Shinji grit his teeth as he saw the beast's many eyes flash and sending out the characteristic cross-shaped AT field energy beams. He focused his own AT field, but while it held under the assault, Unit 1 couldn't exactly anchor its feet to the ground. The purple wave was blown off its feet. Let me communicate the need for more guns, he ruefully replied. Any gun big enough for the task would also vaporize much of Tokyo Free. That is why he has chosen the inside of the geofront for this battle, and you cannot risk any big attacks here. You've gone to great pains to deconstruct my mindset, but clearly you don't know Ayanami. Where is she, anyway? Trident's Dominatus looked up at the hole in the geofront. Even the mighty war machine as an Ava would suffer broken bones dropping from that height. It'd be stuck helpless for far too long. As proven by their own continued survival, only speed had any value. Veins popped on the beast's glisteningly smooth white skin. It turned away, then silvery lines wrapped around one of its 6 legs, across its human-like upper torso and its neck. Like some sort of string ninja, Principio Eternus landed just nearby, wires glinting out between knuckles. Held together by the AT field, thin but impossibly strong, the Ava robbed the beast of leverage. Trident's Dominatus flashed into existence just above the massive monstrosity. The prongs of its trident lengthened, and sparks of bright orange energy flickered in the gaps. Did we say you could go? Kaworu asked glibly. This is my city. Don't be so rude to go opening doors without permission, Shinji added. Their Evangelion/Warborn's eyes flashed. The many mouths of the beast grinned. 9 seconds later, the 2 war machines were embedded headfirst into the ground. We should really stop mounting off before attacking, Kaworu noted, spitting out another tooth, a bicuspid this time. He rubbed at his jaw. Who've said something about resonance? Shinji Kari's face was purplish, the flaw in an Ava's control system that the Tridents didn't share. He pushed off the ground and barely dodged an energy cross. The Ava rolled and saw bright orange streaks coming up from the ground. Nearby, the Warden fired back with beams from its trident. The beast's AT field stopped the blasts. Nagisa! What? Toss me. What? You heard me. Ugh. You can fly! Toss me! Kaworu paused in his attacks and stared up at the beast. It stared back. Keel was unsure if it was worth just turning away again to break into terminal dogma, or if he should have just crushed the little annoyances all at once. They were no threat, but they were guilty of wasting his time. What the hell? Kaworu sighed. He spread Trident's Dominatus' wings and swooped to grab the purple Ava. The beast acted, moving at surprising speed for something so big. Its claws slammed into the ground, causing a thick cloud of dust to rise. The Trident and the Ava zoomed out and up. The beast's eyes flashed, sending off cross-shaped energy beams that impacted against the geofront's roof, breaking off pieces of buildings. Dissatisfied at how easily the Warborn bobbed and weaved away from the attacks, it closed its eyes. When it opened them again, the irises were blue rather than orange. The eyes were on raised bumps, sucking in and out, tossing off blue globs that exploded in midair. What, it has flak bursts now? I believe I've told you this before, Ikari-kun. Stop being such a damn hypocrite. At a sufficient height, the Warborn threw the Ava up, burst higher to catch it by its ankles, and began to spin. Faster and faster and faster, they were a spinning disc. Ikari was glued to the side of the entry plug. And then Kaworu let go. Unit 1 slammed into the Ava Beast's AT field at just under half the speed of sound. The field held. Inexplicably, the beast crashed into the ground. The Ava dropped soon after. Kaworu didn't bother catching it. You used resonance between the fields to let the enemy smack itself with its own anti-kinetic property, he sent onto the Ava's frequency. As angels communicate through the interaction between fields, this is tantamount to having it suffer a rejection by its own name. He rubbed at his face and laughed bitterly. Humans, you do not know the songs that echo out of stars. You have to take the beauty out of everything. Groggily, the beast got back up to its feet. Its field flickered out. Kaworu zoomed in, his trident's prongs coming together into a large curving blade. One of the arms slapped at the air. Kaworu just lopped it off. The white flesh at the cut bubbled and reshaped into a person's upper torso. White hair grew. A thin smile. It had his face. The trident's dominators were called, at great speed, being driven into the very rock of the Geofront's walls. I hate, was his last thought. Fighting Keel was like fighting Shinji and Kaworu with the ability to learn and gank his enemy's techniques, only several magnitudes greater. Shinji and Kaworu was no saviour. Everything he did just made things worse. He woke again to the sound of screaming. Lorenz Keel and Fuss Seal was finally in a killing mood. It was in a torturing mood. Kaworu's vision zoomed into the sight of Unit 1 caught in the beast's pincers. One of the smaller claws grabbed and pulled at one of the struggling Ava's arms. With odd care, it forced the arm out, and with slow deliberation yanked it right out of its socket. Blood fountained out the open shoulder. The screaming turned from rage to pain. The huge creature looked at the arm with one of its eyes on the neck of a featureless head. It tossed the arm away and as daintily tore out the other one. Unit 1 screamed again. The E-core that served as Evangelion blood and coolant made it slippery, and it fell right out of the beast's grip. The Ava dropped onto the ground and lay there, still, more of its blood pooling to cover the grass. Kaworu Nagisa moved without thinking. He was slashing at the enemy's back, the arms of his warborn lengthening out into pry bars to widen the wound. Where is that damned core? He snarled. A distraction was so something useful could be done in the delay. He expected the impossibly swift backhand that sent his warborn spinning, crashing down again, its wing pods torn right out of their mounts. He rolled around, trying to evade legs that ended in clawed hands. Shinji Kaworu felt warm and safe. He opened his eyes to see the Farseer smiling down at him. His head was on her lap, and she was stroking his hair. I'm unconscious again, aren't I? Our sense of self-awareness is inversely proportional to the distractions that shadow your thoughts. Shinji blinked and tried to get up. A hand on his forehead pushed him back down. I can't stay here. He tried to get up again, but the Farseer kept him pinned to her lap. She raised her legs and trapped his arms under her right knee. Let go! There's no time! I have to wake up! I have to keep fighting! Time is all you have. Have you learned nothing from me? The Eldar hissed. What is your weapon? Knowledge, Shinji replied softly. Alright, I won't go off without a plan. Could you please let go now, Sensei? I'm not certain I should. This is a rather comfortable position. Not to me, it's not. You monkey and your lack of flexibility. The Farseer scoffed as she spread her legs. How boring. The boy rubbed at his neck and looked around. Around him was a featureless expanse of white mist, with the Farseer and a wraithbone bench the only ornament. What am I supposed to learn here? Today, you learn from me, my lord. A large dark shape with its oily voice approached. The Chaos Marine, his face hidden under his horned helmet, stabbed his demon sword into the similarly shrouded ground and knelt.
Is it not written, know your enemy?
Since you're not my enemy, and a geese only needs to be permanently dealt with at this point, I assume you mean Keel.
Indeed.
The Farseer looked displeased. I am well capable of instructing him in this matter.
You would soften it, witch, and the half-truth is not as sharp a tool as the untamed fact.
Rather than let them bicker some more, Shinji gestured for the Chaos Marine to get up. Time may be meaningless here, but I can't shake the feeling I have to hurry. Let's get this over with.
By your command.
The Chaos Marine turned into the mist, and the boy followed. The elder scowled again, and hurried, if in a deliberately relaxed and elegant manner, to catch up. It was a strange feeling. He was looking through two sets of eyes, seeing himself, yet he was not himself. He was a boy standing on an empty street. He was looking at himself standing there alone under a palm tree. The buildings around him were made of wood, and strangely large cars with broad hoods were parked along the road. The boy took a deep breath and headed home. He looked about 9 years old. The boy had an oddly serious look on his face, and had dirty blonde hair. This is Keel? Shinji looked around some more and saw several very distinctive posters. After World War II? During, said the Farseer. Interesting. This would mean Lorenz Keel is more than 70 years old. This is something from his memories, correct? I suppose I have to get some good insight into his character, or learn he was doing it all for some Freudian excuse or good intentions gone wrong. Do not presume to know the facts before you know them, child. Sorry, Sensei. The boy touched the doorknob of a plain brownstone home near the centre of town, one with a plate reading, Dr. Shallen, General Practitioner. Shinji Ikari reeled from the rush of images and emotions. The family Keel consisted mainly of Franz Conrad Keel and his son Joseph Lorenz. The elder Keel did have a sister, who had married a doctor out in Massachusetts, and to her did he send his son, in 1936, well before the night of broken glass. Little Lorenz was carefully instructed not to talk to anyone about his Vater, or how they lived in Germany. The reason he was waited so long was to assure others in the National Socialist hierarchy that he remained loyal. It suited his own purposes to make use of their resources, to pursue the secret of the lance. He had no real loyalty to anything but that ancient quest. Joseph Lorenz went west, while Franz Conrad Keel put on his hat and coat and just disappeared somewhere close to the Polish border. The boy's last memory of his father was of a tall, proud man with a funny, tangled beard. 2 years later, the world was ready to castigate itself anew. Life, while the war raged on, became fixed in his memory as just dull. School was so-so. He didn't make any friends, but no enemies either. He was 11 years old, but could understand 4 languages. His last name, transliterated into Keel, sounded innocuous enough, and he was told to claim he had come from Spain. As he could read Don Quixote de la Mancha in its original language, that was no problem either. Dull, dull, dull. The streets of Tristram didn't hold many mysteries for the boy. Fear was in the air, but it didn't touch him. He was 11 years old. Why should he care about people he didn't know? The day his aunt and uncle received word that their son, drafted and sent to fight, had died around Tunis. He remained silent, staying out of the way while the woman wept while doing the chores. They couldn't blame him for anything, at worst maybe for not being as kind as he could have been. But it wasn't like he could replace their son. Why should he try? The young adult of the house had never really connected with the brat anyway. He resented the occasional hugs, the declarations that all they had left was each other. His father wasn't dead. He'd return. He couldn't say that, however. It sounded far too unkind. It was unfair for them to expect that just because they lost someone, he too must suffer to even things out. He didn't want them. His father had come back and take him away. Good. Proper. It was how things should be. They had no right to arbitrarily assign bad fortune. In his room he read again and again of Odysseus, that man of many wiles, who wandered many paths of exile, who failed to bring any of his comrades back. One by one, fools foiled themselves. What was that just now? Shinji crouched and rubbed at his temples. Is that really true? So Keel was never really anything but creepy, even as a kid. You do realize the same thing could be said about you, my young king, the Farseer chided, kneeling down to poke him in the forehead.
Children are innocent but heartless, the Chaos Marine added. Rejoice then that your innocence was taken from you at a young age, for only then could have the power to make real choices.
You make that sound as if it's a good thing.
There is no good and evil, only power, and those with the strength of will to seek it.
Shinji rolled his eyes and got up. He followed the boy into the house. The world was engulfed in a blinding flash. Ouch! Again! He looked around. He was facing the door he just entered. Hey, either something's wrong with this house, or that was a time skip. In the year 1944, Joseph Lorenz opened the door to a stranger. The features were vaguely the same. The voice, though never again rising in volume, was familiar. It is true, Rowena. It is all true, was all the man would say. The boy's aunt wailed. Her husband looked disgusted, and he didn't understand. Franz Conrad ate to the nutritional plan that his doctor brother-in-law set up, and remained silent. He only asked for paper and a pen. He stayed up in his room and wrote madly. One night he woke up shouting. Purple is the colour of the priest king. Red, the warrior born, he yelled while pounding on the walls. Sometimes she is blue, sometimes she is yellow, I do not know. The ritual sacrifice is thrown into the waters of purge, the witch, in fire, but she does not die. There is always another. Black is the shadow that follows. Mightier its steps sound the bell, fearing nothing. White is the machine, hail the machine, for it is ever restless. We burn and we drown. It will not end here. There is only betrayal in flesh. Joseph Lorenz Keel pulled his pillow over his head and tried to pretend that nothing had changed. The AT field is the sense of self of an angel. Why am I getting Lorenz Keel's memories? A more pertinent question would perhaps be, if you have these apparently inconsequential recollections, what has he taken from you? The boy and his father avoided each other, much to the consternation of the woman of the house. Family could be noisy sometimes, could disagree, but even that was better than pretending no one else existed. Feeling somewhat inspired, she threw both into her room and insisted her husband take her out for a few hours. It seemed she'd served as a buffer for their contact. Now they had no choice but to interact. They should both be smart enough to know they couldn't avoid having to talk to each other. They're in his room. Joseph had never had to fear his father before. This broken, bony man could with a look make him feel so worthless. His youthful arrogance burned under that dark gaze. Always measuring, always knowing. He hadn't suffered as others had suffered, so why should he be blamed for being safe? He resented that. His father seemed so incredibly disappointed. Franz broke the silence by awkwardly asking about his son's studies. Just as unwilling, the boy muttered something about how it was fine. Franz rubbed at his bare chin. What does it avail you to lie now, Lorenz? What pride is it that you must protect? It is boring, the boy admitted. Do you not have friends, classmates to play with? I have, but if I do not trouble them outside of classes, then at least they do me the courtesy of not bothering me in turn. There was very little he wanted from them. After all, he had not expected to stay. His father hummed again. He looked around the room and saw a well-thumbed copy of the Odyssey. Near it were several brightly coloured comic books. Franz Conrad picked up a copy of Superman. What defines a hero, Lorenz? At the boy's puzzled look, he continued, Is it strength? Is it some innate moral right? Is it simply the act itself? My son, what does a hero need to do to be considered as one? The boy saw his father was willing to wait, no matter how long, for the answer. He thought about what he was supposed to say, then discarded it. He took a deep breath and answered, To win, father. Why is that? Because it would be pointless otherwise, wouldn't it? He waved aside to his favourite story. If Odysseus did not return, he'd be no different from all the others who gave up. He thought briefly of historical examples, then decided not to try. It wasn't like he was being asked to make up an essay or debate on the spot. Some think heroes have to die to be remembered, but even those who didn't get what they want while alive, as long as someone else does win, they get to be heroes. I mean, that's what they say, right? History is written by the winners. Franz Conrad nodded. True enough. You are born in a bad time, Lorenz. Had you been born 10 years earlier, you could have had the chance to be a hero. Or more likely die. 10 years later, and you could ride even more sweeping tide of change. Now all you can do while young is to prepare. Joseph Lorenz had a blatant, "Are you insane?" look on his face. It's not like I want to be a hero. It's good enough to read about. The world has changed around us. You have changed, though you do not know it. I have been given 10 extra years to prepare, and didn't know it. It's as if you would go on a 10-year training trip to learn martial arts, criminology, and high technology just to dress up like a bat and punch people in the face. We only have 5 more years to get you into the proper mindset. So it's you who's been stealing my comic book. The thin, war-weary survivor sighed. Things cannot go back to what they were, you know this. I must teach you what I know, so that you may survive even greater trials than what I had to endure. The boy frowned, just like a grown-up, to force his own principles on someone else for his own good. You may claim to love knowledge for itself. It is likely you would think learning is something to be endured. You need incentive, child, the knowledge that what you will learn will be of real use. Franz Conrad considered the guarded, unenthusiastic look on his son's face. Lorenz, go get a knife. Huh? Go to the kitchen and get a knife. It is required to illustrate the lesson. The boy got off the bed and went downstairs. Franz looked pained. The vision so far had proven accurate. He had to do what must be done, and he had no illusion of ever being a hero. He had lived through a monstrous phase in humanity's history, but even the scars on his flesh and the ragged remains of his soul couldn't break his resolve. He'd become a monster, to do what needed to be done. Only by being finally vanquished could he know the hero. Joseph returned, carrying a foot-long meat-cutting knife. He gave it to his father and wearily sat back on the bed, slightly further away than before. The hero's journey begins with a single step. Too many refuse to even take that step, and of those, many more are content to stop halfway. You could, of course, live a life mired in mediocrity. Many, too, are not allowed to take that single step. For everyone who became a hero, so many, so very many, die unremembered. They die helpless and fearful, reduced from the stature of men into animals to be butchered. For as there are heroes, there must be monsters. And yet, heroes and monsters have one quality in common. It's not mere charisma or bureaucracy that pulls people into obeying their visions of what must be. It is this first and final key that brings with it all other things worth having in life. He made sure the boy's eyes were drawn to the knife. He waved it about for emphasis. What so many lack is willpower. The grisly scene froze. This is a very basic lesson, said Shinji. And yet one so many fail to learn, the Chaos Marine answered with a nod. Not that anyone should try to do this, unless they have some sort of ancient psychic magical technique or doohickey-do. I mean, I know my blood works in rituals, but that's more of finding the ceremonies that actually work. Of course, this one is interesting, for he seems to be sacrificing himself to himself. It is fairly impressive for one with hardly any warp presence. The boy looked sick, but at the same time fascinated. Though he lived in the house of a doctor, he'd never really been exposed to the grisly details, the smell of fresh blood and paling colour of dead flesh. There was no pain. Franz Conrad put down the finger and picked up the knife again. With the point of the kitchen knife, he etched a letter into the wooden floor. It looked like a cross between Y and F, similar to a tree branch. I will give you the tools, but I cannot give you the will to use them. Lightning sparked between the wood on the floor, the edge of the knife and the ragged wound. Sparks travelled up the broken flesh, and the ends flowed back together. Blood seeped into the carving, as if it was a hole drinking it all up. There was a faint slurping sound, rising in pitch until it was a scream. The sound of his own heartbeat rang in Joseph Lorenz's ears. The boy pinched his nose. Ugh. Joseph Lorenz found his voice again, squelched as it was. How did you do that? You asked me how, not why. His father smiled. You never asked for me to stop. What am I supposed to learn here? That I'm lucky to have been ignored by my father? I won't deny we don't seem to be so different after all, but what does that matter? We work at cross purposes. Only one will survive. Kaworu Nagisa was born a monster. This boy here was never his father's tool. He made a conscious decision to become a monster.
That is his power, his will.
Right. So what am I supposed to do? Willpower can only be measured by what it overcomes. You're not going to tell me to believe in the myself that believes in me, right? Shinji scratched at the back of his head. I kinda knew that already. This is unnecessary, I agree, the Farseer added. She put a hand on his shoulder. We have exhausted all our tricks but one. He will not break.
If he will not, then there is no harm in this.
Yes, there is. We are who we are. There is always harm. Shinji frowned. Enough! Time may not exactly mean anything here, but I am bleeding to death out there. I can only use my connection to the Ava to heal if I'm conscious. What do you have? Can we finally break Keel's AT field? He'd finally figured out rapid regeneration was like using an AT field to strip subatomic particles right out of the air and use them to hold together the shape and form of a being. If he could just find a way to turn that to industrial purposes, it would be a staggering development. For the moment, however, he had to worry about survival. That the figures in his own subconscious knew things he did not was no longer quite so unusual. They even figured out whole plans while he slept. It was convenient. He made sure not to think too much about it, for it might stifle the odd creativity.
You cannot defeat the barrier of his soul, my bright lord, not as you are.
Shinji Kari lightly kicked at the Chaos Marine's ankles. If you tell me I must somehow claim his powers for my own, I'll find a way to hurt. No, wait, you're used to that. Pain's nothing but weakness leaving the body. I'll humiliate you. He pointed aside. And she can help. Yea unto me, the Farseer clapped. The Chaos Marine grinned snarkily.
Once again it is not written, know thyself and know thine enemy, and thou shalt not have to fear the outcome of 100 battles.
I would like to know the thing's weak point so I can stab it there repeatedly. With no arms? The Farseer asked archly. I still have the blade in my forehead. The Chaos Marine turned around, his cape billowing dramatically.
Then follow, for it is now my turn to teach. What this witch has long since denied you, it will either give you what you most require.
A dark chuckle escaped from the slits of his helmet.
Or it will devour you whole.
The pyramid quivered as the beast bashed away at its faces with its claws and fists. Misato had to brace herself against the back of her chair, and in choosing to stand, demonstrated her refusal to give up even the slightest measure of dignity to the enemy. How's the pilot? All synapses disconnected. Pilot unresponsive. Misato chewed on her thumbnail. The Trident's Dominatus was faltering in trying to keep the Ava Beast's attention. The secondary armor for the command center buckled inwards. Evangelions forced the pilot to experience feedback. It was unavoidable. Too much pain or fear. She knew how the mind would shut itself down to protect itself. It was bad enough that children were in control of weapons of mass destruction. The world would freak if they learned that the cocktail of chemicals that forced pilots to also risk them turning into drug dependents or even more of a psychological wreck. She touched a stunted cross on her necklace. It was more of a plus sign. It was a lair and they kept in it a doomsday device. God. We're seriously the bad guys here, aren't we? No, we can't be. She glared up at the main screen. It doesn't matter how it started. We're going to save the world! Primary armor breached! Shigeru shouted, panic entering his voice. Breaks in the secondary armors, letting the backlight drain off! It was dark and cold and smelled like mummy wrappings. The walls curved up and vanished into the gloom. It was a very big spherical room. Hissing hinted at mysterious machinery beyond its colossal confines. At the centre of the room was an obelisk of smooth black stone, whose shimmering was matched to that of a heartbeat. Facing it was an old man hunched over a cane, looking very harmless in all the layers of fur coats and mittens he needed just to keep warm. A teddy bear with a cyclopean visor. He patted the base of the obelisk like the head of a precocious grandchild. All around, crystals came alive, rocks glowing with inner amber light, one by one and in a spiral, meeting up at the centre point of the domed roof, thousands upon thousands of them. They were screaming.
Is it not written? Companions the Creator seeks, not corpses, not herds and believers. Fellow creators the Creator seeks, those who write new values on new tablets. Companions the Creator seeks, and fellow harvesters, for everything about him is ripe for the harvest.
Keel said fondly.
My friends, the time is at hand.
His sentiment was answered only by more mindless screaming. Keel turned and walked away, his cane tapping twice for each step on the alien metal floor. This was a hijacked memory. Of course Keel would be able to see him. Right? With the visor of his eyes, it wasn't like Shinji and Kaworu could tell. He shivered anyway, and refused to look anywhere else than directly in front. He didn't move until the sound of the old man's cane faded out of the scene. A different sort of clanking footsteps arrived. Shinji turned to the skull and spike-bedecked shape of the Chaos Marine with blatant relief. Those were human skulls, and blood had soaked into the joints of the armour, but that didn't scare him at all. It was even comforting, such an honest display of murderous intentions.
Are you afraid, my lord? At least now you can understand how people act around you. No knowledge is ever wasted.
It's more not being able to quite understand. There's fear in there. If the one in question is just so harmless, that's not important right now. The boy pointed to the centre of the room. That's psychoplastic material, right? And those... His voice dropped a hitch. Those are human souls.
Yes.
This is the moon cradle.
Yes.
My task isn't done. Even if I beat off the angels, I'll have to tear this place apart. He scowled at the crystals. The emotions pouring out of them were raw and tangible. The anguish was like rubbing at the backside of his eyeballs, and their hate buzzed at the edges of his hearing. The Chaos Marine looked hungry. Murder's bad enough, but the soul should be beyond anyone's grasp. They don't deserve this. No one does. The Chaos Marine laughed.
Not even Lorenz Keel. Not even the man who murdered mankind's future. Man can only die once. Even you should be able to bring them back. What delicious punishment can compare to their soul's own naked truth? They suffer there in seeing themselves unhindered by the delusion of flesh. They are seal. This they have deserved. This they have asked for. Keel has given them the letter of the agreement, if not its spirit.
He laughed again at the cruel pun.
I wonder, my lord, how would you fare if forced to eat such truth?
Shinji blinked. Once, twice, then very slowly he said, I believe I'd be making secondary personalities to act as a buffer against it. Laughter once more, louder and less unkind.
Chaos is a delight in itself. Oh, delicious irony. How well have I chosen?
Everything blurred out of existence for a moment. Shinji looked up. Time may be meaningless here, but it won't be too long before I'd end up dreaming useless little fantasies. What is this about?
My lord, if we were to rate the AT fields of the Evangelions, who would have the strongest AT field in terms of brute resistance?
That would be Asuka. Combining impenetrability of the AT field into a physical attack was a special Soryu no Ugi, an unbeatable ultimate technique.
How about strength in the form of resilience?
That would be Ayanami. She can lace her own AT field without that of an Ava, so it's no surprise she can hold it for longer and with less power drain. Now that Asuka has the S2 engine, that's changed. But all things being equal, this has always been Ayanami's edge.
You are content with being the weakest among all the pilots?
Shinji shrugged. I can turn it on and off much faster if the field doesn't have to be so strong. That's why I can control it much more finely.
A needle can blind an elephant or cause bleeding in its stomach. Neither will kill it with any speed. Keel has taken for himself power beyond any mere technique. You cannot defeat such an enemy with conventional means, no matter how strong your resolve.
Fine. So tell me the source of his power. The 6S2 engines? It's really the AT field that's the problem. If I could just stop him from using it if trapped within some confined space, we do have plans to totally liquefy any enemy in an instant.
Nothing so mundane. He is what he is, because he is the cold, merciless center of Seal.
At the boy's annoyed look at being told something so obvious, the Chaos Marine gestured around.
This is Seal.
The horrid realization was starting to trickle in. What, all of them?
No, but this is what fuels them. Their colleagues, their families, men, women, children. The Moon Cradle is a tomb prepared for the Human Instrumentality Committee. It is a storehouse of souls, a bank of their memories, their hopes, and their infinite wellspring of desperation. They who have given up everything they valued, all that tried them down to human mortality and morality. Theirs is a strength that cannot be exhausted. They themselves exist now in a state not quite man, not quite mind, just below godhood. The sacrifice of themselves to themselves, and their attained wisdom of the unknown ages, before even this solar system existed. Your usual tactics of waiting for the enemy to tire out and make a mistake will not apply here.
Shit. Shinji began banging his head on the obelisk. Are you saying I can't match the AT field because I don't have nearly enough trauma in my life?
For far too long, you have been granted your every whim. Have you considered why it is you can accomplish so much so quickly? Your force of personality only applies as long as they are within your presence.
The rest of it is their decision, Shinji spat out. His forehead began to slide down the obelisk.
That does not apply to machines or random factors. You are lucky, but no one is that absurdly lucky. Chaos does favor you, my lord. Your exploits were greatly amusing.
Bright violet light burst out from the T-shaped slit in the Chaos Marine's helm.
This is why I am most displeased at this revelation. Someone has taken over my prerogative.
Shinji Kari muttered something that sounded like proof of the existence of a malevolent deity. Or perhaps I should cook Misato-san some spaghetti. It was hard to tell.
What are the secret Dead Sea Scrolls?
Their hidden prophecies were covered from the Qumran caves in 1947, instructing the elements of Seal, or their predecessors, to recover Adam and Lilith to set into motion a ritual to achieve the fruit of knowledge. Apotheosis.
What are the secret Dead Sea Scrolls?
Shinji thought about it some more. Ink and parchment. He slammed his head hard enough into the obelisk to dent it. Shh! Are you saying he changed the prophecy somehow? That all of what happened was according to his design? Having fought for so long for man's free will to decide its own future, it turns out I don't have it myself?
Like you, he seems to have the ability to alter probability. He has had 70 years to prepare. Some prophecies cannot be altered, and is it not the finest sort of prophecy? The self-fulfilling ones, the written fate someone actively works to achieve.
Those are called objectives, you know.
Every person prophesies. Every hope is a prophecy in potentiality.
This would never have happened if I hadn't forced them off planet. Or was Keel only waiting for my attacks to intensify enough to bring them all here so we could reactivate the Moon Cradle ahead of schedule? Whose schedule? Shinji Kaworu pushed off the obelisk. The souls around him screamed and screamed, all wanting to die. This is my fault.
Yes!
The Chaos Marine didn't know the meaning of pity.
It is!
Nagisa was actually right. It's all my fault. I let this happen. The crystals began to vibrate. The Wraithbone obelisk began to shimmer with energy.
Chaos is the instrument of its own downfall.
The Chaos Marine seemed pleased.
There cannot be creation without destruction. The only true death is stasis.
I have to fix this! The crystals all exploded, one after another, bathing the scene in light for a brilliant, unforgettable moment. The obelisk unfolded like a desert flower in the rain. Then all was dark, and silent, and empty. Shinji Kaworu was gone. The Chaos Marine laughed.
Ha! Unflinching to the end, I told you. He would not break, not from something as this.
A spring can only be wound so far before it breaks. That is a fate I do not wish for him. Can you blame me for it?
And yet it is this pressure that allows us to converse like this. Only a little bit more to go, and soon it will be complete. It will be glorious.
The Farseer patted her sword. It will be a pleasure to finally, irrevocably, separate your head from your shoulders.
Your sentiments are returned,
the Chaos Marine replied with a grin. The air rang with furious power. It grew thick, viscous, whirling around a roaring, armless spectacle. I am not finished! Unit 1 pushed off the ground with a quick burst of the field and stomped back into a bow-legged stance. It roared defiantly. It wobbled on its feet. Nagisa, actually I need to get a fresh power pack. Shinji looked down at his useless limbs. I have one more plan, but you're going to have to cover for me for a while. Trident's Dominatus writhed in obvious pain inside a circular cage made out of foul lances. Oh, come on! He'd been unconscious for just 10 minutes. There was a loud thump as the beast approached, its many unwanted memories bouncing freely with each step. It towered over the Ava. Heap! The pincer claw, as big as an Ava, swung down. All right! Fine! I get it! The claw stopped. Shinji sighed. There's no point in delaying the inevitable. You've been preparing for this for 70 years. I'm sure your ultimate goal isn't just to beat some kids with their giant robots. Below, Ritsuko Akagi muttered, Cybernetic organisms, you morons. So why don't you just go ahead and get it over with? I'm tired. Go away. Shinji! What are you saying? Misato screamed up at the screen. Misato-san, I have no arms. I have 50 seconds left in my power reserves. There's no point in struggling. It's not as if I'm afraid to die, but it's stupid to do so when there's no purpose served in the demise. It can't be. No! You're not serious! Makoto interrupted. Oh, but I am, Misato-san. Sometimes, the only way to win is not to fight. Shinji sighed again, his voice so soft and so defeated. I'm sorry. Misato staggered back, shocked. She clenched her fists and looked down, silent for a full 10 seconds. Fine! Shut down the Ava! Katsuragi-senpai! I'm going to hate you for this, Shinji-kun. I'm sorry. Shut it down! Turn off everything! Use Ritsuko's shutdown code! Satsuki-Wii's fingers were shaking. She looked aside to Makoto, who looked just as unhinged. He wanted to shake his head, but if even Shinji was giving up, then what could he do? What was left? His eyeglasses glinted and he grit his teeth. He looked away, ashamed. That was an order, Wii. She didn't realise tears were trickling down her cheeks as she input the code and pressed enter. Shinji calmly smiled as his screen died, and the warmth of the LCL inside the plug dropped noticeably. Principio Eternus' rage peaked for a moment, then subsided into uneasy drowsiness. A white cylinder was ejected forcefully out the back of the Ava, slowly drifting down on multiple parachutes. Unit 1 fell down, flat on its face. The beast bobbed its head approvingly and turned away. Misato counted up to 30 and then ran for it. She plopped down on Ritsuko's command chair, flipped up a panel and drove her fist into a big red button.
Mashi! Autonomous action! Switch on!
Abruptly, alarms sounded. The main screen filled up with red hexagons. Instead of the expected danger inside each block, the screens all showed battle, reflex, battle, reflex. Hidden turrets popped out all over the geofront. Bolters and slug cannons burst out in full auto. The Magi saw only one target. It unleashed a full measure of its own pent-up fury. Missiles launched by the thousands, lasers and cannons and glop rounds, Tesla rods extended from the walls, and the main screen blanked out from the brightness of all these weapons coming together at one point.
Oh, hells yeah!
Misato snarled.
Come on, you bastard! Hurt!
As expected, all of these weapons were enough to level a small city, just splashed harmlessly off the AT field. The Magi didn't let up until it had exhausted its munitions. Still seated in Ritsuko's chair, Misato flipped up another panel and pushed a series of blue buttons. N2 mines jumped out from around the beast's feet and detonated. What with the AT field up as a solid barrier against attacks coming from the outside, it meant the blast just rebounded off it, the shockwaves churning up like ripples in a very small pond. The beast dropped its AT field. The screens blinked with status for a moment. The beast flailed about, its skin smoking and torn. Guns tore into its lower abdomen, but it was beyond that pain. It roared and stumbled, crashing down and snapping its own limbs. It tried to get up, only to fall again. Its balance was destroyed. N2 mines sufficient to destroy it would also have been enough to make Tokyo 3 part of the Pacific Ocean. However, its controlling mines had eyes and ears. Feedback from just the merest fraction of that, in the right conditions, rendered them, and therefore their invincible puppet, blind and deaf. The energy-suppressing Tridens Dominatus went out. The Warborn propped itself up, staring in incredulous fascination. Unit 1's eyes flashed. 8 seconds! Yelled Shinji and Kaworu. Its ejected entry plug had, of course, been a decoy. Tesla rods emerged from its back armour and shoulder pylons. Lightning flashed from the geofront's Tesla rods, striking the Ava. It roared in pain. Shinji grit his teeth and watched his power meter go from 6 seconds to 21 seconds. Unit 1 kicked out and spun, much like a breakdancer. As its legs whirled, there was a crackling sound and a loop of lightning flashed out. The loop touched one of the beast's legs and sheared it right off, flesh and bone boiling away. The Ava beast could barely keep itself together. It had no attention to spare for an AT field barrier. Unit 1 got back up, and the Tesla coils reached out again. Ribbons of electricity followed as it moved, like fingers of God grasping a hurricane. Shinji kicked again, and a bright bolt of seething blue starfire burst from his soul. Again! Thwash! The beast roared in pain, burnt holes in its flesh refusing to heal. The body of the Ava was a conduit, channeling, gathering, compressing, bending raw electrons not to fry its own body and emerge with a homing quality to whatever the pilot deems as a target. Unlike the positron or the antiparticle, which was about penetrating power, mere lightning was about getting into the last nook and cranny of the enemy's nervous system. Shinji hadn't tried it before, because it was worse than useless against the AT field. The scent of burnt flesh hung in the air. The killing dance continued. Below in the command center, nerve personnel gaped in disbelief. Makoto felt like punching himself. How many times had they pulled through from some apparently unsalvageable disaster? He really should have had more faith. Misato grinned fiercely.
After this, don't let anyone ever doubt it. Ritsuko Akagi really is a genius!
Totally barking mad, of course, but still brilliant.
Damn it, Shinji, now she's going to be even more smug when she wakes up.
She got up and walked over to the tactical stations.
Ray! Mana! Where are you?
We are in position, Colonel. Misato nodded. The beast was nearly in position too. Shinji Kaworu stopped, breathing heavily. His lungs felt like heavy anvils. His arms still couldn't reach the controls. Controlling the Ava hands-free was more than just exhausting. It pushed sync levels to the utmost. Like the beast, he couldn't raise an AT field for defense.
Nagisa, now's your chance.
I know how much you just so love to throw lightning around. That's why my Dominatus for its living metal is non-conductive. But that thing with the N2 mines, you were totally going to trap me under Ayanami's AT field and pull that on me, weren't you? You're just pissed because it would have worked. Now go do something useful for a change. Kaworu snorted and picked up a foal lance. The trident Dominatus' chest opened up to reveal its core. Kaworu stabbed himself with the lance, and the Warborn's flesh bulged out in ugly veins. Completion, he whispered. He dreamed at night of his father, on a ship, on a black sea. He dreamed of a boy who eats the wind, and a girl of similar age who turned to look at him. She had sunken pits of flesh where eyes should be, and said, "There is power enough in faith, but it does not matter what engine is driven by that faith." "The gods are dead," said the boy, and Poseidon drowned in his own element. He snatched up the trident floating nearby. "This will be our symbol now." "You would give it to science, then, which doesn't require it? That's stupid. There are men in the shape of wolves. They are sated for now, but they will be hungry again. Man is even more terrible and ambitious than even the gods dare imagine, but better than them than the wolves. Thou shalt not pour new wine into old wineskins, or old wine into new wineskins. She that sleeps there is not the Sophia that you seek. I can't have faith in true things. Give me back my nightmares." The girl continued to stare, sightlessly, at Joseph Lorenz. Belief makes things real. Visions of what should be have ever driven man into the depths of his potential. There is nothing there but terror. No light but hatred. A life lived in purpose is seldom wasted, no matter how terrible that purpose may be. As we take from the world, so must we give back the measure of our lives. "Would you both shut up?" said his father. "You give me a headache." He looked up and sighed. "Look at what you've done. We're lost again." The girl pulled her hood over her face. "The stars have changed. They guide us no more." Brilliant wings burst out of the Trident Warborn's back armour, and the iridescent black of its ablative shell flaked off to reveal luminescent living metal within. Trident's Dominatus went from rest to just under the speed of sound in less than a second, wrestling the beast into the ground. The forest burned. While Shinji, Kaworu and Kawanagisa fought, they had discreetly laid lines and symbols to trap each other. Someone who could discern threads of probability would have some difficulty perceiving that which wasn't directed against his own specific spiral through space-time. The trident, now imbued with all the qualities of the Lance of Longinus, leapt up to its owner's outstretched hand. Kaworu reared back, grinned and stabbed down. The trident's prongs lengthened and went all the way through the beast and into the ground. The glow from ley lines converged, and a circle of green light flashed into being around the monstrosity. Promethean chains bound it down. "You spent 70 years preparing!" the boy shouted with all the scorn he could muster. "Your plans! I stole them!" he spat out, trying to hold back a triumphant cackle. "I have taken your miserable pile of secrets. In the end, he that could command the future was the only one that was predictable." The beast struggled, but could do nothing. The anti-AT field nature of its trap kept even Keel from disconnecting from his golem. Shapes flowed around the circle, in glowing green, triangles and circles, in a language lost to time. Shinji frowned. "Wait a second. I didn't recognize it at first because the ends are circles instead of wedges. This is just Babylonian. This is Proto-Akkadian cuneiform. I don't know how the hell it is I can read this, but that there means gate. That one's lock. That's..." Shinji's eyes widened. Unit 1 wanted to palm its face. "As if I didn't have enough reasons to pound you to a pulp, Nagisa. It's..." The Ava's eyes flashed. "A gate. Akkadian. Akkadian gate! Oh, die!" "I have to work with the tools I was given," Kaworu blandly replied. With impossible grace, he vaulted off the bound beast and landed facing Unit 1. "Now, Mr. Akari, what do you have?" "Masato-san?" "Got it, Shinji-kun! Blow the restraints!" There was an explosion at the geofront's roof. One of the retracted buildings dropped free right on top of the Ava beast's head. Large as it was, the building was larger still. A cloud of dust covered the view. There was a sound like the tinkling of many small bells. The beast lifted its eyeless head on the end of a long giraffe-like neck. Its red lips parted, and for the first time, Lorenz Keel addressed them directly.
This is your big plan.
He couldn't raise even the will to laugh, so insulted was he.
Drop a building on me? It is not enough.
Of course it isn't, Shinji replied with casual cheer. It's what you allowed to get too close that you should fear. An hero arrives in the nick of time! A boxy red shape punched out to stand on top of the tilting structure's roof. An hero strikes when least expected. The enemy of all that's good, the ones who want to destroy this world that's made of love and peace, will never escape from justice. Especially in the moment that he feels safe, he will know there is nowhere to hide. The name for this is Dynamic Entry! Kaworu Nagisa realised he had nothing sufficiently sarcastic to say.
What?
Even Keel was taken aback. This was most definitely not in the scenario.
Who?
Mana stood up off her chair and crossed her arms over her chest. The Trident Land Dreadnought's arms, linked as it was to control armature, copied the motion. You don't deserve to know my name! For you there is only judgment! There is only his mighty! Magnus Tancred dived off the building, its booster packs burning red. Falcon!
No,
Kaworu whispered. You can't be serious.
No!
Keel hissed, breaking free of the restraints. The beast began to stand up, concrete giving way.
I refuse to be beaten by some little girl from the margins of what moves in some inferior reject of a war machine.
The building toppled onto its side, but far too late. The Trident Land Dreadnought was already on the way. Its right arm was extended. The rotating conical drill smashed against the beast's AT field and crumpled. Drill! A point, a rock set into the very tip of the drill glowed. Wraithbone expanded into a spiral around the arm, looping up into a reversed cone. Then, like some sort of psychic-shaped charge, blasted through the AT field. The beast had no face, but it showed shock. Mana Kirishima swung with her left hand. Punch! The multi-core drill in the other arm slammed into the beast's head, taking it apart instantly. Then the rate of the Trident Land Dreadnought came into play, the neck splitting open in a wash of purplish blood. Then the war machine sank its drill deep into the much larger enemy. The Ava beast exploded. Mass Production Evangelions fell out of the sky, gasping and flopping about like wet fishes. Magnus Tancred dropped to the ground, unbothered by all the goop staining its war hull. One arm touched the ground, the other raised up and to the back. The building it had jumped off from billowed dust and debris about it. I'm beginning to see why Lorenz Keel had to be born 10 years early, just to have a decent shot at stopping you, Kaworu commented blandly. Hey, I have almost nothing to do with this. It's just a coincidence the scrolls don't mention Mana Kirishima. It wasn't like he'd actually planned to blindside Keel with a drill punch. He'd fully intended to use that to break Karu's AT field. It was just a happy coincidence that not only could someone, Kaworu, manage to hold the enemy in place long enough, but they would actually be big enough to absorb the landing. Faith in friends wasn't a weakness. This guided his own scenario. Kaworu hummed. It's like Canon refuses to acknowledge her existence. The Mass Production Evangelions got up, murder in their eyes. Unit 0 in its bright yellow dial frame poked its head out from the collapsed building. Its eyes blinked as if confused, asking, Oh, should I be doing something now? The MP Evangelion screeched. The glow in its eye went from white to red. They had successfully drawn its attention. Suddenly, each MP Ava wished they were a bird. Without Lorenz Keel's monstrous willpower to direct them, the Mass Production Evangelions had only the basic instincts to draw upon. Unfortunately for them, Unit 0 and the Trident Land Dreadnought were well practiced in taking down berserkers. Shouldn't we help them? Shinji looked down at his useless arms again. He turned his Ava's head towards the Trident Warborn. Do you want to go in there? Principio Eternus and Tridens Dominatus couldn't combine. Gargant Dairael and Magnus Tancred could, and did, with the land dreadnought docking onto the combat frame's back. The Ava had to hunch forward and support the weight with its oversized robotic arms, walking and punching out like a gorilla. It could draw directly from the Trident's onboard fusion reactor to power its structure-reinforcing AT field, and to boost its movement by pushing it against the ground. The land dreadnought took from it faster movement and a better field of view. "Behold! The Tower of Terror! The Pyramid of Punishment!" Mana switched her hard-mount positron cannon to rapid fire. "Die! Die! Die!" "No, I don't feel like it right now." Shinji Kari still had no arms. One of the Trident's Dominatus' wing pods arrived, carrying a familiar purple limb. He'd never really noticed before, but each pod was a distinct cybernetic angel entity, only like a smaller version of the second angel that he had fought, Shamsel. Its little legs clutched at the severed arm, and wide insect wings flapped lazily in the air. Its head, with the two spots that looked like googly eyes, turned this way and that. It was actually kind of cute. The creature opened the arm with a cheapy trip. Unit 1 stared at it. It had no arms to accept the arms. The Dominatus took it instead. "Your stumps have already healed up. If you want this back, I'm going to have to cut them open again." "It would take at least a week to replace an arm through normal means," Shinji replied. "Go ahead." Once again, the Master Trident emerged out of the Warborn's body. There was really no difference between weapon and wielder, a fact that Kaworu didn't even bother to hide from his enemies. He now had the capability to pierce barrier-type AT fields at will. He couldn't entirely cancel out an AT field like the true lance, thus why he had to ask for Shinji Kari to lower the natural AT field that defined an angel or Evangelion's existence. Kaworu pressed the tip to the wound and sliced down to expose the oozing lattice of bone, metal, carbon nanotubes and other exotic materials. "How should I do this?" Unceremoniously, he jammed it in. Unit 1 roared with pain. Its shoulder glowed with purplish fire and the arm spasmed uncontrollably. Shinji felt the return of his left arm, and he couldn't help it. His first act was to punch Nagisa in the face. He felt dirty for some reason. "Fine, be that way," Kaworu huffed. "Holding it together with your own AT field is not a substitute for actual repair. You can just go pick up your other arm on your own. One arm is good enough to use, I suppose, if that's how you like it." Shinji moved away, relieved at any reason to get away. Being amiable only served to make Kaworu even creepier, and intensified the urge to rip and tear his smarmy face off. He shivered again. He needed really 2 arms for that. Masato on the comms announced they were sending fresh battery packs. Rails hidden under the tree cover delivered replacement power modules. Gargant Great General's massive arms grabbed an MP Ava and tore it to pieces. Ayanami felt her killing intent spike for some reason. She looked at the Trident Dominatus on a rear camera screen. The hybrid raved, somehow knowing it had her attention. Shinji disliked Kaworu Nagisa for ideological reasons. The source of Rei Ayanami's hatred was purer than that. Fortunately, she had enough loyalty to Tokyo 3 to take out the present danger before unleashing the Armageddon punch. There were 12 mass production EVAs. Just like before, she couldn't permanently kill them. They could feel pain, she knew that, and ripping them to shreds and separating the pieces was both satisfying and delayed how quickly they could regenerate. "One of these Evangelions must be a master, serving as a relay for all the others," Kaworu commented when Shinji returned. "Keel must inhabit one of them. Our problem is finding out which one must be destroyed, utterly. But so far, all of them seem unkillable, even with a broken core." One of the MP Avas leaned into the sweeping melee attack, caught the Dairael's outstretched arm, and flung it, Ava, frame, Tancred and all, in a textbook judo throw. "That one," the boy said at once. The MP Ava turned to see 2 ravenous war machines leaping at it, their arms out and poised to tear it apart. Instead of trying to dodge, it leapt up and clotheslined the 2 with its own arms just under their jawline. The 2 war machines tumbled in midair and landed flat on their backs. The MP Ava then landed, simultaneously stomping their heads into the ground. It hopped away to evade bolter shots. Since the MP Ava's armour was thinner than the previous models, those things didn't over-penetrate like an autocannon, and the shrapnel damage hurt like hell to heal. "I've never really thought about my future outside of this war," Shinji said numbly, staring up at the Geofront's roof while the sounds of battle rang around. "But now, if I actually do manage to grow old, I can only hope to become an old badass. We are being schooled old school, Ikari. Unit Zero's O seemed needlessly huge. It was in fact so huge Unit Zero had to sit on mechanical legs and needed mechanical arms because its real arms were now comparatively puny. Standing, it towered over other Avas like some sort of man-made mountain. Kensuke Ada would have them all believe the O stands for that awesome. Ayadami kick! And it wouldn't be too far from the fact. Whomp! One of the MP-Avas became pulp. Kaworu tilted his neck back further to see. That big yellow armour thing, that was never really meant for the Evangelion, right? In his makes all the Evangelion modules. The O-frame provides cooling, power reserves, and counter-battery mobility to Unit Zero in its dedicated fire support and artillery role. Ply her out. The front armour plate of the O-frame exploded outwards. Ray had ejected from the frame and taken to slashing away at the enemy with speed and precision using the foe lances. It wasn't as stompy, but her rational mind did appreciate it was faster and more efficient. The one containing Keel was just too agile. The land dreadnought lowered on its mountings to the centre of the frame. Mana had taken to picking up MP-Avas and using them as clubs to bash around the others. Feel the power of my opposable thumbs, bitches! But really, since it was built in the same in-his complex that made Magnos Tancred, their control systems are cross-compatible. Kaworu got up and chuckled. This is beautiful, is it not, Ikari-kun? It is for this that I love war. It is to see heroes blossom that I let myself be stained. I wish we could keep on fighting like this forever. Nagisa, you... Shinji bid his Ava back to its feet, then shook his head. You really are creepy, you know that? He wished he didn't understand how lonely his enemy was, that the only ones who truly understood him wanted to kill him. He was raised as a weapon, and perhaps unable to relate to anyone except through the medium of violence. Kaworu wouldn't trust the common human bonds of love, of respect, or praise, for these in time would fade into complete indifference. He couldn't abide not being in the centre of attention. Keel was outnumbered and outgunned, and he knew it. His plan was shot all to hell. He had no backup plan. For over 70 years culminated into one single moment, and after it, time itself no longer existed. He couldn't look beyond it. Even if he had died, he should have been able to see hints of what else remained. Still, he lived. He wasn't beaten yet. He commanded his Ava to jump, and the ground swallowed it up. The remaining MP-Avas followed, sinking into the ground. The others found the surface under their feet solid as hell. What was that? Mana complained, banging her fists together. The other Trident crew, Vince Nagato and Jiro Taneda, slumped in their seats. They were completely exhausted. Magnos Tancred's motion capture controls only dealt with the arms. They had to deal with all the balancing and the timing and the accuracy and all the jumping around in the highly reckless moves that Mana demanded and somehow not get crippled or killed. Shinji was in a crouch, warily looking around. Don't worry. This is Nerve after all. They can't hide. Misato was already relaying results from the sensor grid. Uh-oh. This isn't good. White growths burst out of the ground to wrap around Unit Zero and die Tancredo. What's this? Tentacles? Mana screeched. Ugh! Saw blades whirred, but the tendrils just regrew and continued to constrict. Not tentacles. Vines? Roots! Data showed the MP-Avas had fused together with long fleshy tubes and smaller canals that spread out. Sinkholes began to appear all over the geofront's grassy surface. Fascinating, Kaworu whispered. If you're not winning the game, try changing the rules. Do plants count as... Of course they do. Shinji felt like hitting himself. I've seen angels that exist as mathematical concepts. He went over to the Trident Land Dreadnought to help by cutting the tendrils off at the base. Ray flared her AT field, and the vines trapping her were ripped to shreds. Still, he wondered, how does he do that? He could do weird things with the AT field, but total control of his Ava down to the DNA, its molecular composition, was beyond even Shinji Ikari. How could he simulate plant-like? Shinji paused. How does the Ava extract energy from a supersolenoid organ anyway? Mitsuko-sensei's explanation sounded suspiciously close to photosynthesis, only using particle/antiparticle pairs. A massive root broke out of the ground in front of the nerve pyramid and slammed into the broken armor on its northwest face. Smaller trunks and tendrils spread out, slowly growing into and pushing aside armor plating. Holes widened quickly, but hardness and tensile strength immaterial against such an attack directed the seams and joints that held those armor panels in place. Think! Think, damn it! He didn't use this earlier because it must have some obvious vulnerability. We could try attacking that. Kaworu pointed to the most obvious and accessible portion of the enemy. It's too obvious. It's a trap. It could also be a double blind to make us think that, or simply that there is no other trap. Oh, Ayanami! What is it, Shinji-kun? Spread your AT field across this area. Go as deep as you can. Don't bother trying to neutralize the enemy's own passive AT field protection. Just suffuse through the bedrock and hold it solid. Not a barrier, just solid. Understood. By your command. She knelt and placed her palms to the ground. I'll just stand over here and stay out of everybody's way then, Kaworu added sulkingly, still being ignored. Shinji looked at his power reserves. 14 minutes 36 seconds. He took a deep breath. Unit 1 lifted both hands, then dropped them, its AT field hammering down on another. Whoomp! A round section of the surface sank by a few centimetres. Again. Whoomp! Again. Whoomp! The ground was compressible. It wasn't doing much effect. Except that since Rei's AT field touched the enemies, the shock was transmitted directly into the enemy's body. Its portions outside on the surface bulged and burst. Of course! Kaworu exclaimed excitedly. It's the volume. Even an angel, or in this case, Evangelion, can only occupy so much space at any time. Reduce the amount of space available, and since its eternal structure is not rigid, that mass has to go elsewhere. I was expecting having to fight some sort of Hydra analogue, but this is just as well. Shinji nodded silently. He learned this while using the AT field to press and shape armor plating for Luftschloss Sturmbrand. Look! Rei pointed to something only visible to certain senses. Mana pouted at being left out. The enemy was shrinking and receding, like a worm, moving up. The trunk at the pyramid bulged out even more and let out a shriek. It punched straight through. Misato was thrown to the floor as the spike broke through the wall behind the main projection screen and continued through the intervening space to mangle the command tower. The sound of tearing metal remained as the spike began to take root. Reflected sunlight streamed in through the gap. Katsuragi-san! Makoto rushed out of his chair to the collapsed colonel. Shigeru groaned. The humongous impact had actually thrown him clear off his chair, and the metal floor of the command tower bent up around the spike. He realised there was a weight on his chest. He blinked. Blonde hair in drill curls wrapped around his arms. Hey, you okay? Satsuki moaned.
What just happened?
We've been shafted. Open your eyes. You alright?
The young woman opened her eyes and gasped. The main screen was projected off the floor of the command centre to its angled black ceiling. As the projectors were undamaged, the main screen remained active, though with a large, odd, bright hole near its centre. It showed Unit 1 tackling the slug-like form of the enemy. There was a blue flash, and the massive form spasmed from a massive electric shock.
Thanks,
said Misato as Makoto helped her up. She quickly took in the situation. Her chair was almost perpendicular to the floor. She tasted blood in her mouth.
The monitors! Are the monitors still functioning?
Makoto glanced at the tactical stations.
They're still functioning, Katsuragi-san. We still have the secondary tactical stations, even if those go.
He hoped Kaido was not injured by any falling debris. The main screen showed the roots extending out, like a web reaching the walls of the geofront. There was an earthquake. The walls of the geofront began to glow green. Rei clutched at her head and screamed.
What's happening?
Misato asked aloud, at the same time as Shinji did. Kaworu's voice came through the comms.
He's reactivating the geofront. The seed.
Ah! He too collapsed to his knees.
This power. This type of AT field, it's...
Unearthly moans and strange mechanical noises filled the air. The quake intensified. Up above, the terrain bulged suddenly. Pipes were wrenched out of shape and tunnels cracked. The worried people at Cerberus Base held on tight to their chairs and fixtures, while citizens inside the distant shelters screamed and prayed. Deep below, in the Sephirotic grave filled with Evangelion carcasses, each for some reason bearing the shape of Unit Zero's head, glowed red. Eva carcasses suspended in fluid began to twitch. The long-dead Evangelions jiggled around in the crake. Suddenly, Cyclopean eyes switched on. The light of awareness returned to empty helmets. Hundreds of them, piled high upon another. Mouths welded shut, let out muffled groans. Gendo Ikari frowned. His white gloves turned black and burned away. Why am I not being affected? Shinji thought while worriedly shouting for Rei to respond. Is it because of the covenant with Lilith? This is her domain, and this is her shell. The Mass Production Evangelion in its new form lay motionless, though its vines had throbbing veins. It lived. Unlike its previous form, he had no idea just where to cut to cause it pain. Could it even feel pain? He grinned suddenly. Mana! Oi! What can I do to help? First, go and shoot Nagisa in the head and separate the Warborn's head from its body. With pleasure! Unit 1's attention remained with Unit 0 in its arms. There was the sound of a shot, and then the whirring noise of a circular saw blade. Done! What happened? The head just turned into some sort of silver liquid, then went back into the neck. It's growing a new head. Damn. I had a feeling that would happen. Can't really kill him that way. He stood up. The ground continued to rumble. Please take care, Ayanami. I'm going inside. Maybe there's some connection point that I can cut to stop this thing from taking off. It didn't really matter what Keel and Seal intended. It was obviously not for the good. At the very least, it would cause mass property damage. He'd promised to stop destroying so much of the city. Negligence was unaccountable. Up above, the bulge of the geofront shell was becoming conspicuous. Mount Akone was starting to crack, and highways had already broken off the new rise in the terrain. Down below, one of the Ava Zero heads leapt out of the pit. It hissed at Gendo. Its spine had lengthened and new bones clicked together like the insect feet. It floated in the air much like Shamsul. Its jaw split open into 3 segments with rows of sharp, shark-like teeth. Hatred poured out of the chasms. More and more of the decapitated remains reactivated. The nearest head darted forward at Gendo. Nerve's Supreme Commander frowned and slapped at the air. The head broke apart, orange goo splattering the walls all around Gendo. Gendo raised his hand. The eye in his palm blinked. Useless old relics. Be silent! The strange tree-worm Ava thing that Keel turned the MP Avas into let out a screech and hissed red steam from breaks in its skin. It forcefully ejected a white Evangelion. It crashed and rolled and stained the ground with slime. What remained crumpled into itself, its insides turning to LCL and the skin shrieking like an old plastic balloon. It smelled of pus and ammonia. The strange glowing red patterns in the geofront's walls faded. The black moon crashed back down to Earth. It had risen no more than 10 meters, but it was huge, and the earthquake that it caused registered all over Japan. Unit 1 fell flat on its butt. Trident's Dominatus raised its head. Nice try, Kaworu said chidingly. Well, I don't know what just happened, but it seems we just got a reprieve. Unit 1 just growled. It got back up and turned away from trying to enter the nerve pyramid. It shoved away large oozing sacks and grabbed the nearby foal lance. The last MP Ava pushed off the ground and hissed like a snake. It spread its wings and talons were at its tips. Yelling incoherently, Shinji charged. Shrugging, Kaworu followed. The enemy pivoted on one foot, batted the lance aside with the back of its left hand and drove its heel into the purple Ava's chin. There was a distinct crack of a reinforced spine giving way. Unit 1 dropped. It grabbed at the air, snagging the Trident Warborn just as it reappeared, catching it by the wrist and pulling it down. Face met knee. Living metal dented inwards, and it was shoved right into the path of the incoming Unit 0. The yellow Ava's arm sank right up to the elbow in living metal. The MP Ava gave a shove, and both stumbled back. Shinji tried to get up, but got another kick, this time to the side of the head. It hurt. The MP Ava grinned in triumph as it pressed its foot down on Unit 1's neck. Precognition worked by glimpsing potentiality. Some theorized that what psychics could see wasn't so much the future as a possible future, a cascade of choices, maybe even an entirely different timeline. True prophecy was something else. It was like skipping ahead in the story, catching snippets of it, then going back to the unfolding narrative. It was more accurate, but such a view often destroyed context. And what if the story had neglected certain characters that seemed to have already served their plot purposes?
Keel,
Shinji chuckled painfully.
you just keep forgetting about Mana Kirishima.
The MP Ava felt pressure around its head. Its head collapsed like an overripe melon under the grip. Magnus Tancred was usually only around hip high to an Ava. Mana enjoyed being able to throw around Evangelions for once. She picked up the MP Ava and slammed it into the ground. The Ava's head regenerated. Mana caught its arm as it reached up, bent it all the way back, then punched it in the head hard enough to leave inside a hole in the ground. Saws whirred and its legs were gone. Shinji grasped the fallen lance, quickly strolled over to the last remaining Ava, and nailed that troublesome unit into the ground. The lance sunk deep, up where the bident prongs combined to form the shaft. A prog blade deployed from under the purple Evangelion's armpit. It stabbed the enemy's core many times, then left the knife there. Shinji grabbed the enemy by its shoulders and pulled it up slightly.
Keel!
I know you can hear me. A monster like you can't be forgiven. I can't kill you since you're not exactly here, but soon. You can't hide from me. You failed. Now get the hell out of my city! Unit 1 grasped the prog knife by the pommel. The MP Ava shrieked and spasmed again from electric shock. It lay still, its skin steaming.
Fools,
it spoke. Unlike the other Evangelions, with a proper mouth and a tongue, it could do more than just roar.
You know not what you do. You have done nothing but to throw away the bitter cup that would have helped numb the pain. You've done nothing but to place this world you claim to love in greater peril. You may have the skill of adults, but your hearts remain that of petulant children. Soon, you will know only suffering beyond your worst nightmares.
What do you mean? Why'd you do this? Why, everything, the impact. Did you want to be God that much?
Fool! Unimaginative little amateur. You understand nothing and dare everything. Let what will come be upon your head.
Another jolt of lightning passed through the knife. Answer!
The future of man ends here. Rejoice in your coming oblivion.
That said, the last of the MP Avas burst into LCL. Shit, said Shinji, as the answers he needed dribbled off his hands. Lorenz Keel had left as suddenly and as mysteriously as he had arrived, doing everything in his own way to his own purposes, and shedding no light upon the dark secrets that he carried. His reasons would remain his own. Unit 1 roared in frustration. They'd won, again, but it was Pyrrhic at best. Shinji looked around. Rei was disentangling her Ava from Kaworu's Warborn with very obvious disgust. She kicked him in the face to get loose.
You people are jerks,
the other hybrid complained as he rolled off. Mad at Magnus Tancred inside the old frame. He'd expected them to be dancing with joy at laying the beat down on something even he couldn't defeat. Instead, the hulking machine seemed somber. Sunlight still leaked through the hole blown through the roof by the Ashino lance cannon. It had blasted through all 50 armour layers between the geofront and the Hakone surface. The terrain all around the Ava was scarred and in certain places still on fire. The nerve pyramid had a big gaping hole in it, one that went all the way past the Ava cages and into the command centre. Site defences were either destroyed or out of ammunition. The geofront shell, in almost lifting off, had broken all linking roads and rails. Then there was the political fallout to consider. The city had never before been so utterly vulnerable. Something glinted at the edge of his vision. Kaworu Nagisa remained. No, they hadn't run. Only one person there had actually managed to gain anything from that debacle. Nagisa! The Triden's Dominatus made a courtly bow.
At your service.
What was Keel after?
How should I know? There are many things of possible value down below.
He smirked and shrugged.
Perhaps it would have been better to interrogate him before letting him get away.
Yes, I realise that now, Shinji angrily shot back. We no longer have a common enemy. What are you after?
Ma, I am saddened by your suspicion, Ikari-kun.
Our truce has expired. If you have nothing more to accomplish here, you would have left already. As it stands as you stand, it's clear you have some sort of objective. It's not that likely you just want to hang around and be annoying.
You wound me, Ikari-kun.
And cripple, and maim, and burn. Why are you still here?
Oh, fine. I do have an ulterior motive.
He tapped the chest plate of his warborn.
This is still incomplete. I don't suppose you would let me just touch the true lance of Longinus for a little while, if I ask nicely. I know you people have been inconvenienced, and I'm prepared to compensate you.
The lance.
Yes.
The lance of Longinus. That lance. The key created by the first progenitor race to ever exist in this universe.
Yes.
No.
Pretty please?
Unit 1 stared at its hand for some time. It pulled out the faux lance. Slowly it got up and turned to face the trident warborn. Light coruscated off the hybrid's living metal shell. I promised Asuka I wouldn't kill you. I've been holding back, as you have been, just enough to allow Keel's prophetic visions. It's enough. There'll be no more compromise. No negotiation. Unit 0 took the faux lance from Unit 1 with a samurai-like bow.
I have made no such promise,
Ray spoke up. Damage control or recovery was an important phase after what could be called a shooting phase in the assault phase. Up on the surface, UN/IG teams were already trying to open and relocate people from the deeper shelters. The tunnel system between them had collapsed and there was the risk of a cave-in. The bulge of the geofront was still apparent. The main screen of Cerberus Base showed black. There were smaller windows showing scenes around the city, but as the AT field sensor centered upon Nerve was utter darkness. It was the most powerful AT field ever detected, so much that the receptors had no way of displaying what was happening. It blocked the entire electromagnetic spectrum, light, magnetism, subatomic particle emissions, everything. Seismic detectors sent out waves underground, and the AT field just absorbed it. The air directly above the geofront, over Tokyo 3's downtown area, was a bright red mist. As far as the universe itself was concerned, that area didn't even exist. That didn't mean those outside didn't bother to try and breach it. Yang crossed an item on his list.
Alright, small object moving at velocity greater than the speed of sound explodes. Small object moving at velocity far less than the speed of sound stopped and repulsed. Large object moving at velocity greater than the speed of sound.
The UN Navy battleship Titus Andronicus let loose an uninspiring barrage from Sagami Bay, nearly 30 kilometres away. Jets of flame burst out where the massive 15-inch shells touched the field.
Those shells may simply not be large enough, Colonel Nasuno put in. This is an AT field. Did anyone here really hope we could penetrate it?
Yang did not. However, he was willing to try all sorts of silly things to figure out the mechanics of it.
Large object at relatively slow velocity? We tried driving a truck off a cliff. If that just bounced off, an N2 mine would ricochet before detonation.
Yang began chewing on the tip of his pencil.
We can't really put an N2 mine on top of it, since it's a field and not a solid. It would just slide off.
They assumed the heat and pressure wave of an N2 mine or nuke would likewise just end up damaging the surrounding area. Worse, if they succeeded, it would just collapse the geofront, dooming the city and Nerve underground. Energy beams were just deflected right back at their emitters. Bombs had their explosive force dulled, and simple kinetic strikes seemed to be repulsed proportional to its energy content. A man could walk in, and pressure would increase until it felt like a physical wall. He could go in 10 metres further walking slowly, and thinking happy thoughts than if running.
Nope, I've got nothing,
Yang finally admitted. He leaned back on his chair and stared up at the ceiling.
Nerve can keep its secrets for a while longer.
Those secrets can kill us all.
I knew that Nerve's geofront was an artificial structure, but I never really believed it was, a spaceship.
The blocking field was the dome. It filled up the missing portions of the black moon, and no further than that perfect sphere. He swiveled his chair aside.
You don't seem surprised by this, Mr. Ryuji.
Kaji shrugged.
We all heard a voice in our brain. Just because we heard it inside our brains doesn't mean we should trust what it says about nerve being created to trigger third impact instead of stopping it.
He was in a meeting with the Prime Minister of Japan when the attack happened. That blast of information went directly into everybody's brain, and there were a few dangerous moments as the pilot for the transport copter blacked out while it was happening.
It's bad enough that it's plausible,
Yang answered with a huff.
How bothersome.
His look sharpened for a moment, remembering just what he had to do to make sure China survived in the chaos of post-second impact. So many had lost so much. His own notoriety was bought with the blood of millions. History has a tendency to repeat itself. Soon again, lines would have to be drawn in the sand. Brother against brother, the human-angel war would reopen old scars. Those on the surface actually had a decent idea the fight was over. For one thing, the strange energy screen and the symbols on the ground were gone. People could now flee Tokyo free. They all heard Lorenz Keel's last curse.
Soon you will know only suffering beyond your worst nightmares,
Yang repeated scathingly.
That's comforting.
Unit 0 stood slightly crouching with its left leg out, holding the lance at shoulder level with its right arm. Its left arm was likewise outstretched, following the line of the lance and lightly resting over the prongs. Kaworu lifted his left eyebrow. What is that? Some form of Gatotsu? You would really try to thrust that fang of a wolf at one who owns the sky? Ray tensed. Kaworu weighed his options. He had no particular hatred for Ayanami, except insofar as distaste for being such a failure of a being that could have been a goddess among mortals. His Trident's Dominatus was superior in every way to an Ava. It was not funny. He looked around. Unit 1 was a good distance away. Like Lorenz Keel, Shinji Kaworu had proven able to feel just where he would exit from a teleport jump to greet him with a stab to the face. Annoying. A bit closer was the land dreadnought, and it seemed to be sulking about, no longer being in the fight. Its melee-centric configuration was less useful against a flying being. Unit 0 vanished. A sonic boom echoed around the geofront. Theoretically, Unit 0 under Rei Ayanami's control could do everything Unit 1 could accomplish, and more, due to Ayanami's own innate understanding of her AT field. There was a loud crash and the sound of wrenching metal, and Magnell's tankard in the O-frame was shoved into the ground. The silvery form of Trident's Dominatus stood over it, its trident already raised high in a two-handed hold. Right, Kirishima it is then. By all logic, the land dreadnought was no threat to him. He could see no way he could even hope to hurt his Dominatus. Kaworu had just seen it smack around a being that he couldn't, in the best day, defeat. Better to get rid of it than to be caught unawares at a suitably dramatic moment. Kirishima! Ray and Shinji both gasped, one abruptly bleeding off speed in midair while the other pushed off the ground to help. Kaworu flared his AT field. In the quality of resilience, the beast backed by its 12 S2 engines was second only to beings such as Adam and Lilith. In the quality of strength, in the force it could apply or absorb over a moment, Kaworu Nagisa and the Dominatus was the most powerful on Earth. The two Evangelions were blown away, like sticks in a hurricane. Kaworu stabbed down. Armor famed for being able to shrug off impacts and explosions that would stagger an Evangelion simply gave way. Warning. Reactor failure. Containment breach. Warning. Reactor failure. Containment breach. Mana screamed. The Trident had impaled Magnell's tankard straight through the fusion reactor, then the deeply buried command compartment, and out through the thrice-thick glacis plate. Hot steam hissed out from gaps in the ruined metal. Unlike a fission plant, there was no risk of meltdown, but leftover radiation was still a problem. Of course, the living metal of the Dominatus didn't give a damn about the wash of neutron activation. Kaworu pulled out the Trident, its living metal prongs going back to a more manageable length. The Trident land dreadnought slumped and fell over with a dull thud. No last-minute heroics from you, he sneered. Trident's Dominatus vanished again. Unit 0's descent stopped. Rei Ayanami felt a tight grip around her neck. Her attention had successfully been drawn by concern for her comrade. And no series of super moves from you, Ayanami. This is not a duel. Kaworu grinned as he held the Ava in the air with one hand. Why should I expend time and effort in Mortal Kombat when I can just pull off a quick... The living metal of the Dominatus responded to his will, and Kaworu closed his fist. With a neat clicking noise, 2 scissor edges came together. Zero fell. There was a purplish blur, and Unit 1 landed with the other Ava in its arms. Most of the Ava. Its head landed some distance away. The red glow in its single eye blinked on and off, slower and slower, and then died. Fatality. Ayanami! Kaworu tisked. So, you prioritize Ayanami, Ikari-kun? I wonder what Kirishima would feel about that. Shinji ignored him. Ayanami! Ayanami! Can you hear me? His voice broke with panic. Inserting additions, an Ava may move at ludicrous speed for something massing in the tens of thousands of tons. The AT field made this possible. The AT field demanded an extraordinarily high level of synchronization. There was a soft voice at the very edges of his hearing. I have failed you. Headless, Unit Zero's hand moved up to touch the other Ava's chin. Forgive me? No, Ayanami. It's all right. There's nothing to be sorry about. It's me that should ask. Unit Zero's arm dropped. Ray! Shinji resisted the urge to shake the orange Ava. No one could be forced to wake up from being decapitated. Very gently he put down the other Ava. Principio Aeternus clenched its fists and knelt there, completely unconcerned about the enemy that still remained. Shinji watched his power timer tick down from 7:23 to 5:31. Hello, girlie. Been a while. Unit 1 pressed the spot on Unit 0's shoulder armour. The pylons popped up to expose that Ava's Titanicus reserve battery packs. Unit 1 growled and inserted the charged packs into its own power slots. It turned its head towards Magnus Tancred's fallen form. Shinji felt somewhat ashamed, but it was the cold, cruel logic that since a Trident land dreadnought was so big, and the diameter of a Trident's prongs only so wide, despite having 3 of them, there was the greater chance of the crew surviving a direct hit. He had been stomped into the ground, cut, burnt, had his limbs torn off, but nothing he had ever experienced before hurt as much as that moment. He knew fear. And then, somewhere in the back portions of his mind, something whispered, if they are indeed dead, what are you prepared to do? Unit 1 picked up the fallen foe lance and turned to face its enemy. If you say something about my not having any honour, I will be severely disappointed in you, Ikari-kun. Kaworu commented in the same cheery voice he'd used earlier in complaining about being stabbed in the face as a hello. I've told you this before. I did not come here to fight. He grinned wider. I came here to win! Shinji Ikari wanted to shout. Do you understand now? Do you understand, Masato-san? All of this? This is why I hate Nagisa beyond all other things on this earth. He was so goddamn polite and so obliging and so goddamn easy to forget that he's supposed to be your goddamn enemy until he's finished slicing your throat open. The LCL inside the entry plug boiled. I will kill you now. You keep saying that. What about your promise to dear Asuka? Unit 1's eyes flashed. After this? After Germany? Ayanami and Kirishima saw you's friends. She's not a self-centered glory hound, but the safety of all she cares about over the propriety and gratification of revenge. Asuka is a hero. She slays monsters. She'd be much angrier if I was stupid enough to actually let you get away with this. Call me not a monster without accusing yourself. You're a traitor, Nagisa, to both sides of your heritage. Now be purged, heretic! Kaworu laughed, loud and clear. His delight was honest and boundless. Completion. Finally, yes, the circle is now complete. No more distractions, no more feints. Come on, then. This is the fate that was forced upon us. Let's finish this dance. Gendo Ikari had, by then, reached Lilith's chamber. His jacket was torn, even burnt in some places, but he looked triumphant. The scenario remained.